what we saw last night was original. Is it a new path? Will it endure?
Oh, geez, Dom, that's hard to say. It certainly wasn't Kennedy-Nixon. But I will say, Tom, it was more informative than actually the first debate. Of course, people would say, hey, that's a pretty low bar. I thought that last night, Biden had a couple rough patches, which were mentioned at the top of the in the segment here. The question from Stephanopoulos about expanding the size of the Supreme Court. But by and large, I think he avoided making unforced errors, which I think his team will take as a win at this point in the race. Trump, was interestingly, I thought Trump was alert. He was feisty, quite combative, I think, with Savannah Guthrie. And I don't know how that'll play. I would.
Peter, I don't want to interrupt you, but look, we're going to get the play on this all through the day. What I want to know from you is going from Kennedy-Nixon up through the debates of the 80s and the 90s when you were at MIT, and now on to the formula. Is this going to be the new formula for debates?
Well, it could be something like this. I think people the debate format has clearly broken down in this cycle. And the amount of information that comes from them is limited. On the other hand, the problem here is that you don't really get to see them head to head, and so I think that's a complication, and that's a problem. I have to think that this is not the way it's going to be in the future, but I'm not sure we're going to go back to the kinds of debates that we have had in the past, especially if you've got people basically just filibustering during the debate.
Professor, what's the one thing that we need to know? Whether people show up and vote? And actually looking at what we're hearing right now, is turnout going to be record-breaking?
Turnout looks like it's going to be very, very big right now, as Donald Trump might say. I'm keeping my eyes on two trends they're cross-cutting, I would say. The first is we're seeing a spike in early voting numbers, but we're also seeing a rise in Republican voting registration. On early voting, it looks like basically the president may have scared many Democrats and independent voters into voting early. By the end of this week, the expectations are that 40 million Americans will have cast their ballot. That is a huge number when you think that in 2016, the total number of ballots that was cast was 138 million. So that's a big deal. And it could mean a lot it could mean that we have a much clearer picture on election night in some of these bellwether states like Florida and North Carolina about who will be the eventual winner, because their votes will be tallied much sooner and early, and they also tally quickly the mail-in ballots. But there's also, I just want to point this out, there's another underreported story, I think, on white non-college educated voters. In crucial battleground states like Florida, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, they are registering to vote in much greater numbers than in 2016. And I think this is good news for Donald Trump, especially given the problems that he appears to be having with white college educated voters this time around.
But, Professor, if there's a big turnout, as expected, and we trust the polls, and that seems to be what you're intimating, what needs to happen from now until November 3rd for Joe Biden not to become president?
Donald Trump needs to change the narrative, and he's running out of road. The problem is that the contest right now remains where it's been since late spring. It's basically a referendum on his handling of the pandemic, and everything he's tried to change the conversation hasn't worked thus far. That's what he's got to do.
Peter, you wrote with Peter Harris for Chatham House last year a brilliant essay on dysfunction in this nation in the American century. We've clearly observed dysfunction in this process, including what we witnessed last night. How's that American century doing?
Not too good right now, Tom. And so that's the problem, is that right now the country is deeply, deeply polarized, and it just has trouble getting things done programmatically. This didn't start on Donald Trump's watch, but it got worse on his watch. And frankly, you know, it's going to be a problem if Joe Biden does win, if the polls hold up and so forth, and he does win. He's going to have a problem on his hands going forward because the country is very divided. That is the challenge. And it's a challenge for what the country is trying to do in foreign policy. Frankly, I think the biggest challenge for the next president is to figure out a way of reconnecting what the country tries to do internationally with its domestic political economy. That's broken right now.